Greetings, Elderly Vegan here, and welcome to my video on how excess sugar has the ability to bind with protein, which is not a good thing from a health perspective. When this happens, it has the potential to lead to a number of deadly chronic diseases. The process is called glycation, and when this happens, it renders the protein dysfunctional. These sugar-damaged proteins can also be called glycated proteins. And in the event this is a new concept for you, you will definitely want to understand how this process occurs and how to minimize the negative outcome. I say this because the forms of deadly chronic disease I'm referring to include coronary heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, and some forms of cancer, to name a few. As it turns out, this process of sugar binding with protein is regarded as one of the hallmarks of aging. And in my previous videos, I've covered two other hallmarks of aging, which include the inevitable shortening of telomeres, which are those tiny little end caps which keep your chromosomes from unraveling, as well as the ultimate loss of mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are present beyond count in every cell of your body, and they are responsible for virtually all of our energy requirements. Suffice it to say, any of these three hallmarks of aging, glycated proteins, shortened telomeres, and loss of mitochondrial function, will ultimately send you to the far shore. But the good news is, there's much one can do to slow down these hallmarks of aging, and thus benefit from many extra years of a healthy, vibrant life. As always, I wish to mention the sources for the information in this video. It comes primarily from Dr. Michael Greger's book, How Not to Age, as well as AI Overview, which happens to be in lockstep agreement with the information provided by Dr. Greger. I also consulted Dr. Mark Hyman's book, Young Forever. So, as it turns out, there are two separate methods where excess sugar can bind with protein. And the method I will discuss first is when a person's blood sugar is consistently too high, as seen with pre-diabetic conditions or diabetes itself. As such, this excess glucose in the blood not only binds with the proteins comprising our tissues, but once the binding has taken place, there's no going back. And these structural proteins then become dysfunctional for potentially years to come. For example, high blood sugar has the ability to bind with the proteins in the lenses of our eyes. And when this happens, cataracts are the result. Whereas sugar also has the ability to bind with proteins in other tissues as well. This includes our bones, joints, and muscles, therein contributing to osteoporosis, arthritis, and muscle wasting. Youthful skin also takes a hit when excess sugar binds with the proteins in our skin. Blood vessels stiffen, and this in turn increases the risk for cardiovascular disease. Apparently, virtually all tissues and organs in the body are adversely affected by this process. Yet, as mentioned previously, there's a second method where this disease-causing process of sugar binding with protein has the potential to degrade our health. And this is the direct result of the kinds of foods we eat and how the food is prepared with regard to the temperature of the cooking. And when it comes to cooking, high temperatures under dry conditions are the worst thing you can do to generate proteins binding to sugar. In fact, you can actually see this happening when your food acquires that distinctive, yummy-looking golden brownish coloration. Well, that golden brownish coloration is a direct indication that sugars are binding to the protein you're about ready to eat. Now, isn't that reassuring? But since these glycated or sugar-damaged proteins are from the food we eat, as opposed to the damaged structural proteins comprising our tissues, the concern here is with regard to setting up pro-inflammatory conditions throughout the body, as well as increased oxidative stress. Okay then, what dietary choices have the potential to cause the most problems with regard to damaged proteins? And what cooking methods make this process even worse? As it turns out, if you wish to reduce your intake of the worst offenders for the glycated proteins, you might want to consider making the transition to at least a primarily plant-based diet. According to the sources I consulted, and this includes AI, mind you, the worst offenders include red meat, fried foods, processed meats like sausage and bacon, aged cheeses, and other dairy products like butter, cream cheeses, and saturated fats. Roasted nuts also made the list. But roasted is the key word here, while raw nuts are not associated with this high percentage of glycated proteins because heat isn't involved. As for the worst offender of the lot, it seems that oven-fried chicken breast holds that distinction. So, at the opposite end of the spectrum are the foods which have a minimum of glycated proteins. These include legumes, whole grains, raw nuts, seeds, veggies, and berries. And according to AI, foods high in fiber will indirectly reduce the glycation process because of fiber's ability to slow down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. This obviously refers to the method of glycation where high blood sugar is involved. And in a similar fashion, AI mentions other foods, spices, oils, and certain beverages which also have the ability to indirectly discourage glycation. These include dark chocolate, cranberry juice, garlic, olive oil, cinnamon, ginger, cumin, rosemary, and green tea. As mentioned before, the hotter the cooking temperature and the drier the heat, the more likely sugar will be binding to protein and therein accelerating the aging process. And taking this to the extreme, for those of you who saw the Lord of the Rings movies, at one point the loathsome creature Gollum describes his preferred method for food preparation. Gollum's request? We wants it raw and wriggling. Well, one thing's for certain. With regard to avoiding glycated proteins, Gollum definitely had it dialed in. Raw and wriggling would be the way to go. Now then, returning to reality. I would be remiss if I did not inform you of the two acronyms you will encounter if you read further on this subject. In my opinion, these acronyms are more bother than they are worth. But again, they're well established, so you will encounter them. Thus, I feel obliged to mention them. Therefore, the acronym you will encounter which refers to these damaged or glycated proteins is AGES. This stands for Advanced Glycation End Products. Obviously, the acronym of AGES is in reference to their association with the aging process. Yet there's another acronym you will probably encounter as well, and this refers to when AGES bind to receptor sites. Hence, the acronym in this case is RAGE, which equates to receptor sites for advanced glycation end products. And when AGES and RAGES accumulate, this leads to a cascade of inflammation and hence to the various forms of chronic diseases. So do these acronyms make understanding this process any easier? Not from my perspective. I much prefer to refer to them as either sugar-damaged proteins or glycated proteins. At any rate, I hope you found the video informative, and if you did, please give us a like. To your good health, the elderly vegan.